So today in my talk I want to continue with my appreciation of ignorance and the third poison of ignorance. I said some words about it last week, and we had a very rich discussion afterwards, and then I had several people come to me in Dokusan with some interesting points of discernment and discussion. So I'd like to advance the discussion some. So this is releasing your attachment to the truth. Releasing your attachment to the truth. This is this day of the eclipse, and I understand the astrological, if not the astronomical, energy of the eclipse is one of release. Right? And I think perhaps that's something of the energy that I'm feeling. If you can just really sink into the energy of this, vast power source of the sun, just getting blotted out. It's getting blotted out right in the middle of its orbit. What comes to me is like all of my habit energies, all of my autopilot energies, all of the drives that are constantly, continuously kind of ruling my life and ruling my experience, just to have them cease. It's this cessation. This energy of letting go, of releasing ideas about the way things are, things that felt important or feel important, my truths, they can just be neutralized if their source is blotted out. Yeah. Release. Release. Dogen has this quote in the Shobogenzo. This is a fascicle called Life and Death Shoji. It's a fascicle I'm not that versed in, but I came across this quote in a certain context, which I'll share in a second, and it really resonated for me. So actually I invite you all to close your eyes and just hear this. When you simply release and forget both your body and mind and throw yourself into the house of Buddha, and when functioning comes from the direction of Buddha, and you go in accord with it, then with no strength needed and no thought expended, free from birth and death, you become Buddha. Then there can be no obstacle in anyone's mind. Simply release and forget both your body and mind, and throw yourself into the house of Buddha. So this is the spirit of practice Dogen finds essential, and it really is essential to be able to throw ourselves in like this. So in this release, there is actually a reclaiming of a depth of agency that we tend to lose by overcomplicating our lives and by finding our center of agency in our will instead of in our Buddha nature. It says when the functioning comes from the direction of Buddha, then you become Buddha and there are no more obstacles. I've been talking a lot about agency this year, and we've been talking in our Zen Life Path group about vows, and how vows are kind of the mobilizing force, the potentiating force for our deepest sense of agency when we commit to a big path of service, the Bodhisattva path. Maizumi Roshi even said that he was asked what persists after death, if anything? And he said, our vows persist after death. So that's what Dogen is talking about here. When the functioning comes from the direction of Buddha, when we align ourselves with the activity of the Buddha, the activity of the Bodhisattva, who is serving compassion and wisdom, then in a sense the energies of the universe are enlisted to support us. And there are no obstacles that can stop us. But when our sense of agency comes from our will, and it comes from a self-centered or a self-aggrandizing motivation, we're working at counterforce to the universe, to the fundamental truths of interdependence, the fundamental truth of impermanence, as we seek to hold on to things. Sometimes what we're holding on to is our own idea about the truth, our own sense of rectitude, our own worldview. This is why ignorance becomes such a powerful poison, because it's a form of attachment that keeps us from seeing the truth and keeps us motivated by our self-centered view of the world. Well, last week I ended my talk with a quote from Joshu. It's part of an encounter he had, which is part of a koan. And I said, Joshu said, I do not abide in clarity. Remember that, those who were here? Yeah, that had some resonance. I do not abide in clarity. And I'm going to share that koan. And I want to mention that this quote from Dogen that I just mentioned about releasing yourself into the house of Buddha, it actually was quoted by Katagiri Roshi, who's a famous Roshi, Zen Roshi, who has a lineage, in America, in his commentary on this koan. Blue Cliff Record, Case 2. Joshu, teaching the assembly, said, the ultimate path is without difficulty, just avoid picking and choosing. As soon as there are words spoken, this is picking and choosing, this is clarity. This old monk doesn't abide within clarity. Do you still preserve anything or not? Then a monk asked, well, since you don't abide within clarity, what do you preserve? Joshu replied, I don't know either. The monk said, since you don't know, teacher, why do you nevertheless say that you don't abide within clarity? Joshu said, it's enough to ask about the matter, bow and withdraw. Joshu is known as being very artful with his words. He's always teaching, pointing things out, and then turning people in their understanding when they come in and try to pin him down. So, in the beginning, Joshu is actually quoting the Shinshin Ming, which many of us know, the trust and faith mind. The great way is without difficulty for those who do not pick and choose. When preferences are cast aside, the way stands clear and undisguised. So this applies to choosing clarity over confusion. It applies to choosing enlightenment over delusion. Okay? As soon as we make a discrimination like that, now we've entered into some sort of clear view, and then we have a preference for one over the other. At the deepest level, the level at which Buddha is saying ignorance is the source of suffering, there's an ignorance in this. This is clarity. This is confusion. This is enlightenment. This is delusion. As soon as you say that with any sort of conviction or definitiveness or, sense like it's always true, you've shifted into delusion. You've shifted into an ignorant and unaware perspective. So Joshu kind of probes the monk by saying, this old monk doesn't abide within clarity. Do you still preserve anything or not? The monk tries to catch him. Since you don't abide within clarity, what do you preserve? What are you clear about? But Joshu refuses to get caught. He says, I don't know. I don't know that either. And then the monk, he kind of goes too far. Since you don't know, why do you nevertheless say that you don't abide within clarity? So see, now the monk has kind of gotten into like a logical argument. Right? He wants to be clear about this whole matter of clarity and confusion, enlightenment and delusion. He wants to be clear about it. And Joshu at that point just like shoos him away. You've gone too far. Just off with you. So this ignorance as a source of suffering, the deep ignorance, I'm not talking about ignorance you don't know something, but it is related to not being aware of something, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this ignorance is the source of suffering. It's fundamentally connected to an attachment we have to truth, to being right, to a certain clarity of view. Right? When we're really fixed on an understanding, fixed on a view, that's, from a Dharma perspective, speaking in the terms of the Dharma, it really goes against the truth of impermanence, the truth of no self, the truth of nirvana. Okay, so that's why it's ignorance in that way. But anything fixed. There's something that comes through with why we do this, and maybe if we reflect on ourselves, we can see this, is that these truths that we have actually kind of begin with preferences and then get escalated to the level of opinions and then get elevated to the level of truths. Preferences, opinions, truths. Even our view of what is enlightenment and what is delusion can be informed by this, basically elevation of our preferences. We can see how we might prefer to be clear about something rather than confused. Right? Confusion is, it can feel unsafe if we're confused, right? If we don't know what's going on. If we might not know how to proceed to advance something that we want to advance, so we feel threatened by that or unhappy or disappointed with that, right? So I don't know, is there anyone here who prefers confusion to clarity? Yeah, right? We prefer the clarity. Anyone prefer delusion to enlightenment? I had a Dogen with Maizumi Roshi once, and he said, delusion is more fun. He did. I was kind of shocked, actually. But, delusion is more fun. I guess I knew that at some level, So it was a teaching for him, for me to recognize that, he felt the same way, and obviously he committed himself to a practice of, practicing awakening and teaching awakening. He suffered from alcoholism, so he was, intoxicated, which is, according to our fifth precept, would actually generate delusions, So, and surely he drank because he liked it, right? He preferred it. In some instances, he preferred being deluded. I think there's some insight in there, and there's some recognition, but also some suffering caused by that. Yeah, so our ignorance is connected to an attachment to the truth, to being right, and we raise our preferences to the level of opinions, and then our opinions to the level of truths. Bernie Glassman called the Four Noble Truths, Buddhism's Four Noble Truths. He said, well, I'd prefer to call them the Four Noble Opinions. Yeah, there's really something to that, What if we got down to well, they're really the Four Noble Preferences. So a question came up last week in our discussion. It was Seiju who asked, how do we know we're ignorant? I thought this was a really rich question, because it is not always obvious. We tend to have a greater recognition, ability to see when we're being greedy or aversive, the other two of the three poisons, right? But being aware that we're ignorant is trickier, and stickier. And this is an important question, because the Buddhists did say that ignorance was the most difficult, of the poisons to deal with, for this reason, that we are not aware of it. It's hard for us to become aware of it. So how do we become aware of what we're not aware of? How do we become aware that we're not aware of something, and then become aware of it, right? I think we sort of touched on this last week, but there's this image that has appealed to me over the years, which is like the sphere of your knowledge, or you could say the sphere of your awareness. You could picture it as a certain, say, a sphere. Okay, so you're aware of a little stuff, you're aware of a lot of stuff. And everything outside of the sphere is stuff you're not aware of, right? Well, right on the surface area of the sphere is the interface between what you're aware of and what you're not aware of, which is infinite. So what you're not aware of is infinite. But your experience of what you're not aware of that infinity, actually increases as your awareness increases. Isn't that kind of cool? Right? The more you're aware of, the more you're aware of what you're not aware of. Right? You can become vast, really, in your awareness and your understanding. You can be tuned into all sorts of cosmic energies. You can be aware of, all sorts of nonverbal communications going on, vibrations that are moving through, all sorts of sensitivities, the things that we're generally closed off to. And become more and more aware of that. And the more and more we become aware of, we're like, holy cow. There's realms that I'm not aware of. So that's good, right? That's good to always not close down the awareness, right? Not to close, oh, okay, I got that. I'm gonna just put that in the bag and I'm just gonna keep that. No, it's to always to continue to expand. So I asked myself that question that Seiju asked, how do we become aware? We talked about it a little bit last week, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts in our discussion. How do we become aware that we're ignorant? So I came up with three ways. So number one is the Dharma. Right? Actually study the Dharma. That points us to where and how to look in order to really understand the important things. Number two is to have a spirit of curiosity, or not knowing, to cultivate that. That tunes us into feelings and vibrations and realities and energies that we were previously unaware of. And the third way that we become aware is reality crashes. Something happens in our life that kind of goes against our worldview or just challenges us and challenges our understanding. You know, it can be as simple as somebody reacts to us in a very angry way or a very unexpected way. Right? Now, you can, and most of us do, kind of instantly sort of defend ourselves from something like that, or, you know, explain away, you know, why somebody's feeling that way. Kind of file it away, categorize it, understand it. But if we really listen, you know, listen deeply, we may find that, well, we've actually missed something big. You know, I feel like the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, these are like this. It's big, you know, truth-telling to wake us up to things that we've been, you know, ignorant about. And it's very, it's sad to me how people respond to, you know, movements like that, and, you know, just kind of fight back, you know, and say these are interest groups that are, you know, making political statements. No, they're just wake-up calls. So it's always, what are we missing? What are we missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? It's important to maintain this as a point of practice every day. Yeah, what might I be missing here? Especially when that reality crash happens. So I want to conclude by repeating this paragraph from the Shobogenzo. When you simply release and forget both your body and mind and throw yourself into the house of Buddha, and when functioning comes from the direction of Buddha and you go in accord with it, then with no strength needed and no thought expended, free from birth and death, you become Buddha. Then there can be no obstacle in anyone's mind. Release and forget your body and mind. Release and forget your truths, your opinions, your preferences. Let them go and throw yourself into the house of Buddha.